What if I told you that your constant need to people please is just self-abandonment in disguise? The more you try to be understanding and to accommodate to others, the more you are directly causing yourself to suffer and burn out. The problem is that we all too often think that we need to people please to some degree in order to keep people around. The right people aren't going to take discomfort as a problem. They're going to see it as feedback to understand how to interact with you better and how to have a better relationship with you. You need to realize that people pleasing is essentially about keeping the wrong people in your life happy while you suffer. Because if you stop people pleasing, yeah, some people are probably going to leave, and that's okay. But the people who stay, those are your people. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 methods that I use based on my experiences to help you stop people pleasing. The first thing that you need to do in order to stop people pleasing so much is you need to cultivate a better relationship with yourself. You really need to have a strong sense of self in order to better discern what are my values versus what are the other values that this person is showing up with. Because if you don't have a clear sense of this, you're going to continue to appeal to their values and their needs at the expense of your own, and you're not going to be so aware that you're doing this. And something that I find that's really helpful to share with you guys is that values are not feelings. I've heard this a few times. It took me a while for it to sink in. But values, I think for a lot of us who get stuck with what are my values, we tend to think like what feels good, like what do I like? And I think the reality is if it's hard for you to decide like what are my values, I don't know, I would say reverse engineer them. Think about what bugs you. What can you not tolerate? When you are with friends, when you are with your partner, what are things that come up frequently for you that just keep getting on your nerves, keep bothering you? And then you can backtrack it. What am I uncomfortable about in this moment? Oh, I don't like the way that they talked to me. This doesn't feel like they're respecting me. And then you can realize, oh, I value someone talking to me in a respectful manner, and this is not how I feel respect looks like. Ding dong dang, there is your value. So if you're really on a journey to stop people pleasing, it really begins with knowing yourself more and taking stock more and more of these moments that you feel uncomfortable. The next thing that I recommend is honestly, if you are a chronic people pleaser, you need to remind yourself that at the end of the day, you are the most important person in your life. You should be the most important person to yourself. Now, I think as a people pleaser, we are already overly extending ourselves for other people's needs. We are over considering other people. We are being overly nice, overly accommodating. So our problem isn't that we are not nice enough, that we are not considering people enough. Our problem is that we are not considering ourselves enough. Our problem isn't going to be solved by doing more for other people. Our problem will be solved by sticking to ourselves more. If you are a chronic people pleaser, essentially what you are saying to yourself is that everyone else's needs are more important than yours. And when someone else's needs are in direct conflict with your needs, you will self-abandon. You will give up your needs to fulfill theirs. So when it comes to moments where you have that urge to people please, you have that urge to essentially self-abandon in order to make this other person happy, to make this other person feel comfortable. Something that I ask myself in those moments is, because usually in those moments, there's something you want to say. There's something you want to do, but you don't because you're too afraid of how it's going to land on the other person. You're too afraid of taking up that space for yourself. You're too afraid of basically communicating what you need from that other person, and you're focusing way more on their needs than your own. So in those moments, in order to help center myself back to me and what's important to me, and reminding myself that I'm important too, is I ask myself, if I were to say the difficult thing, would I be okay with saying that? Even if it doesn't land well with this person, even if this person leaves me because of it, would I be okay with myself for saying that? And then would future me, in hindsight, look back at this moment and be proud of myself? Would I be proud of myself for saying the difficult thing at the risk of losing this person? Or would I be proud of myself for doing absolutely nothing and continuing to feel that friction, that discomfort and unhappiness with this interaction? Because 9 out of 10 times, I feel the answer is usually yes. I'm just too afraid. I'm too afraid of how it will land. I'm too afraid of how they're going to take it. But when I ask myself this question, and I recommend asking yourself this question too, because it will remind you that, well, this might not land well with them, but it is important to me, and that's the point. If it's important to you, it's important, and it needs to be said. The next thing you need to do is you really need to understand what are your actual needs in relationships. Now, this goes back to my first point about really understanding yourself and getting to know yourself, because that is truly the first step. And along with what I said, you really need to dive down into what your values are and like what your needs are. Going beyond your values, like we all have essential needs. We need people who will communicate with us openly. We need people who will love us unconditionally. We need people who make us feel safe. We need people who we feel we can trust, we can talk to. We all have these basic relational needs. And for the most part, I'm willing to bet like a lot of them are similar, but we probably vary in what's like prioritized in our relationships, what is most important to us to feel connected. You really need to think about what those needs are for you. What do they look like? Now, for me, for example, I grew up in a situation where I felt very invisible. I didn't really feel like my family paid too much attention to like my inner world, so to speak, like what my thoughts were, like what I was thinking about. These kinds of things were not really like discussed in my household. And so as an adult, I really prioritize relationships where I can have deeper conversations. I can share my thoughts and opinions. I can hear the thoughts and opinions of others and have these like very emotionally rich conversations. So for me, that is a need that I have in a relationship, because I've noticed that whenever that is lacking, I always feel very lonely and I just feel like there's no connection. Now, for some people, this might be more important, and for some people, this might be less important. It really just depends on, where you are in a spectrum of things. But the key thing is that you really need to ask yourself, like, what do you need to feel good? So one thing that I really ask myself is, am I comfortable with this situation? Because I've had moments come up, and I'm sure you do too, where in the moment you feel bothered by something or upset or angry or annoyed. And you just don't really know why. Like you start to wonder like, oh, am I being unreasonable for feeling this way about this? I'm sure this person didn't mean any harm, or maybe they had no idea like that I would feel this way. Like in some way you might start to think like this person didn't do anything wrong. It's not their fault, but I don't feel good about it. And you can ask yourself in that moment, like if things were to continue as they are and I did nothing, I said nothing, and I just accepted the situation, do you feel comfortable about that? And in this moment, that really helps you clarify, wow, I don't feel comfortable with that. That's really something I need. Once you start to build this list, this understanding of what's important to you and what's not, then the next thing to do is like really to focus more on your ability to set boundaries. I think that's hard to accept if you tend to people please a lot, is this feeling of standing up for myself is going to be a problem. It's going to create conflict. It's going to make me a difficult person, or I'm being selfish. But the reality is you're just trying to be just enough. You're just trying to very minimally show up for yourself and ask for basic human things. You need to communicate to people how you're feeling and worry less about how it lands with them. The main reason why boundaries are so important is not so that like everything could be smooth sailing. The point of boundaries is I call it, you drop a truth bomb. Okay. I call that for myself because that has helped me build the courage to set boundaries more. Just like throw out a truth bomb. I don't like this. I really am not okay with this. You just tell them some information, you give them some data, then you sit back and you watch how they react. Because the right people, they are going to be like, oh, okay, cool. They're not gonna have a problem with it. The biggest thing that I ask myself is, if they aren't willing to adjust to this, am I okay with that? If this were to continue to go on as it is, would I be okay with that? Because usually the answer is no. Like usually what I'm communicating to someone is so important to me. It's fundamentally like what I need from a relationship, what I need from a friendship, that if they're not willing to adjust or even like try to understand why this is important to me, then why do I want this person in my life? Why do I want to please them? If there's something that, it took you a long time to understand that, this bothers me, and then it took you a lot of courage to fight that people-pleasing tendency to actually communicate to someone like, hey, this doesn't really work for me. And then after all of that work, after all of that courage, just to say an honest truth about yourself, that person cannot respond well, or they resist, they defend, they deflect, and they just have no interest in trying to understand, trying to adjust in any way, then after all of that, you kind of know that this person was never going to adjust or try to meet your needs ever. This person might be very self-serving, and at the end of the day, people pleasing, as I said, is about keeping the people in your life, the wrong people in your life, and fulfilling their needs at the expense of yours. Because what you are realizing when you go and you set these boundaries and you find people don't respond well to them is these people were never going to align with you. And you have just been hoarding these people who don't align with you, who make you feel crap all the time, who violate your boundaries, who violate, who go against your values, maybe value different things. You're essentially collecting more and more of these people that aren't right for you, the more you people please. But the more you try to kind of set boundaries, to be a little bit more disagreeable with people, you will realize that, yeah, a lot of people are going to go. A lot of people might leave. That's the reality, but that's okay. They just weren't your people. They're someone else's people. And then they can go and find someone else who aligns with them better. And that gives you more space, more energy to find the people that actually are your people, that actually align with who you are. And at the end of the day, will be willing to communicate with you in the ways that you need to feel good in the relationship. Now, I think that the hardest thing about doing this is that we often look at the relationship in front of us and we want to find security in that relationship. We want to feel secure with that person and trust that that person is going to stick around no matter what. And so ironically, our tendency to people please is avoiding the difficult conversations that we know could cause someone to leave. But the reality is that, yeah, as much as there should be security in a healthy relationship, some of your relationships aren't going to have that security. And this process of communicating what you need from people is essentially your way to snuff out the people who just aren't safe to be around. What you need to say to yourself is, I'm not going to leave myself. No matter what I say, I'm still going to be here for me. This person might leave, but that's okay. I'm not abandoning myself just to make them happy. I'm not abandoning myself just so that they stick around with me. Because what you're really doing is you're outsourcing that sense of security from a person who's not right for you, rather than outsourcing that security from within yourself. That security to say I am great, I'm enough, I'm secure with myself, and I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to abandon myself. If they don't like it, great, they'll go, but I'm not going to go. I'm going to be here with me because I like me. And I know that that's a really hard journey for some people, but unfortunately that is really where all of this starts. You have to really have a good relationship with yourself and actually care enough about yourself and trust in yourself that you can basically say anything you need to anybody because you will always be there for you.